Welcome everyone to today's Business Performance Center webinar. My name is Kevin Velasquez and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager here at NAIFA. If you didn't know, the Business Performance Center is one of NAIFA's 5 centers of excellence, with the BPC dedicated to giving you the tools and resources you need to help build and grow your practice. BPC has a ton of great content ranging from articles by industry thought leaders, the ability to watch past webinars on demand, and tons of other great upcoming webinars in addition to the one you're on today. So if you want to check all that out, visit bpc.naifa.org to learn more and subscribe to get the latest updates. A few housekeeping items I want to address before we dive right in is, just so everyone knows, today's webinar is being recorded. So if someone wasn't able to make it, or you have to drop out early, or you just want to watch it again, this recording will be sent out to everyone who registered in the next couple of days. In that email, we will also include a survey, and we'd really appreciate your feedback so we know what kind of content you want to see from the BPC and NAIFA in the future. Also, if at any point you have a question you want to ask our presenter today, feel free to ask it in the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we will save some time at the end to get to those. So just ask them and then we'll address them at the end. So without further ado, I want to introduce briefly our special guest for today, Gary Weber, founder and CEO of NAIFA partner AccuPoint Solutions. But I will leave it to him to tell you a bit more about who he is and what he does. So Gary, take it away. I believe you're on mute, Gary.
Well, that's a great way to start a webinar. Anyway, you all might be you might be better off I was on mute than not. So anyway, I would just thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Appreciate the introduction. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in the financial services or insurance industries for the last 35 years. I am the founder, as Kevin mentioned, of AccuPoint Solutions. I have spent about 30% of my career on the sales side of the business. So I've actually been an insurance agent, an investment advisor, register rep, wholesale, or sales manager. So I've used data tools and products. I spent part of my time on the operations side of the business for the J&W Seligman funds, and then the chief operations officer for Morgan Stanley for their fund complexes. So I've used data products and had to support those types of data products and actually build some. And then spent some time over at Broadridge, helping to build out a data strategy and reviewing about 150 data companies and buying 5 or so to execute on that data strategy. So that kind of brought me to where we are today as the founder of AccuPoint. We've been in business for about 6 years now. And we have clients that range anywhere from small mom and pop shops, literally one-person shops, up and through clients that are literally multinational companies with, tens of thousands, if not, over 100,000 individuals. So we kind of serve the gamut there. So what I'm going to talk about today is whether you're a small firm or large, really the same best practices hold true for maximizing your ROI when using data, whether that's to brand, market, recruit, analyze, or even update your CRM. We're going to cover a few topics. We're going to talk about how ROI targets vary from firm to firm, but they're really positively impacted by the same best practices. So again, it doesn't matter your size or what you're doing. The importance of understanding your data and the base for that, the importance of setting realistic expectations, how to best leverage your provider for maximum results, which is really critically important, and what was learned by past mistakes users have made that really decrease their productivity. And that might be some of our users here, myself as a user in past lives, or even myself as providing this data in past lives as well. There's lots of stats out there, lots of things to do. I'm going to talk about, tell some stories here about what we've learned through practice and through experience. So this slide is probably the most complicated that we have here. And there's a couple things on it that are important. So on your right, I have what I consider the key non-negotiables, right? Doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter how efficient you want to become, how much you want to increase your ROI, doesn't matter what services you're using, which you'll see over on the left-hand side here. What really does matter, though, is these non-negotiables. You got to get your data straight, right? You need to use the best data. You need to understand what data it is that you're using and how it can help you. You want to look at the best profile. Profile is critical. And then there needs to be diligent oversight. If you want to get efficient, if you want to get an increase in your ROI, that is our experience and what you need to do first. Those are non-negotiables. And that doesn't matter whether you're cleansing a CRM with your data or analyzing it, or you're using it for some of the services that we have over there on the left. So let's kind of talk about each one here. The best data, right? So why is it important, right? This isn't anything that is going to, knock you out of your seat here. Just bad data or incomplete data waste time. It's kind of as simple as that. You get the return the wrong targets, the wrong people that you're looking to call or call on. You get lots of bad contact information if you have bad data, right? That's the important thing. And the reality check is that best does not mean perfect, right? There are a lot of moving parts when it comes to data, a lot of different things that happen. You want to set that realistic expectation that, I'm just getting the best. What can you do to get that, right? Now, whether this is internal or external, some of this applies to both. I'm going to focus a little more on the external side. A lot of you are probably going to external providers like us. But again, some of this will apply to internal as well. Ask for references, right? We think that is a key to what you're doing when you're looking to get the best data, right? If there's a provider out there, there are people who have used them, ask for the references. Make sure you do that. I am amazed at how few people actually ask us for references. Ask for specific samples of data before you commit, right? I mean, this is, again, kind of basic, but you want to get samples. You want to ask for specific samples. If you get data where every single field is filled in, unless it should be that way, you should worry. You should ask about it. If every email, every phone number, every address is filled in, why? Was that taken from some part of your the provider's database that is actually the best part and you're not really getting reality? You're going to want to do that. You're going to want to ask for those samples. You're going to want to ask how often the data is updated and then push back, right? That's very, very important that you push back. When we first started this business, I would say to people, they'd ask me, how often is your data updated? And I would say, well, weekly in some cases, monthly in others. And I would pause and I would ask them and say, you probably think that's the end of it. And that's probably what you've heard. And their answer would be yes. But there's more to it, right? That cannot be every single data point. You want to know what data points are not updated weekly or monthly. It can't be every single one. You want to find out why they're not updated in that basis. All right. Those are very important things to ask. You want to ask about the sources. This is important too. And of course, there's always going to be some secret sauce to this. Not every provider is going to tell you every source. I know we won't tell you every source as well, but you want to make sure that there are sources that are important that you're going after. Recently, I came across a provider that basically is touting that all the data that they get is coming in an automated fashion. I've since learned that that data in the automated fashion is coming from one source and one source only. And that is a source where you can pull in an automated fashion. In this particular case, for this particular data, there are over 100 different sources that you can go to get it. So if a provider is not talking about the sources and not being upright with them, again, there's going to be some gray area with that secret sauce out there. You should question that. You should push. You should ask them. They should be forthright about it. You should ask about fill rates, right? It starts with the base figures, right? In our case, I'm going to pick on the data that we have: agents, agencies, advisors, firms, broker-dealers, RIA firms, right? If you don't have the base, then you're not getting all of those individuals that you want, all those individuals you need, all those that you should profile, all those that might fit your profile. All right. So you really want to ask about those fill rates and start with that. Do you have 2.5 million insurance agents? If you have every advisor, is it 750,000 advisors? Know the data. Know what it is that you're asking, right? Everything else drives off of that with the fill rates. I've got, if I've got 50% or 75% of my data, I've got emails on my base. Well, if that base is only 50% of what it should be, that's a lower number to begin with. Be selective and clear about what's important to you overall. Okay. There's certain things here that may be important, that may not be important. I talk to people every day, and sometimes they will say to me, well, do you have this data point? Do you have golf handicaps? Do you have titles on everybody? Doesn't matter what the data point is. Some of the answer is yes, some of the answer is no. I will often ask, almost every time, ask people, is that data point important to you? And I will tell you that 9 out of 10 people, and there's a specific set of data points, will say to me, no, that is not important to me at all. The next question I ask them is, well, you have it today from a current provider. Is it good? And a lot of times with certain data points, they say, well, not really. So why are you focused on those fill rates and those data points that aren't important to you? You should be, and be selective about them. Fill rates are great. Quality is just as important. So you want to ask when you're talking about those fill rates, are you doing anything to remove data on a regular basis based on certain logic, based on certain benchmarks? Because you're not always looking to have 100% fill rate, right? But it should make sense. If you're looking at professional designations, lines of authority, it's not going to be 100%. Even if you're looking at emails and phone numbers, shouldn't be 100% because that data is going to age. There's always going to be some people moving out. There's no way those data fields are at 100%. You should be focusing on that. You should also ask about quality metrics and how they prove them out, how individuals prove them out to understand if you're getting the best data, right? Here, I will tell you what we do at AccuPoint. We will actually email folks, call folks, go back into our original sources when we're challenged and look to see if those individuals still have the data that we're posting, right? What better way to understand our user experience? What better way to know whether our data is good or bad? And what better way to know if you should be tweaking some of your logic to get better data than what you have already? You want to be sure that your provider is comfortable answering all your questions and they give concise answers. I am sure that there are lots of people here that will make phone calls out to prospective vendors, and they ask a question, they kind of beat around the bush a little bit, or they don't answer it precisely, or they answer it with what they want to answer it, right? Oh, we believe in quality over fill rates. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're not able to get all the data, or is that true? Expand on that. What do you mean by you believe in quality over it? What do you do then to remove those, and how do you know you're not removing good data? You want to insist on transparency, right? How do you know if you're getting good data until you use it? You don't insist on transparency. So in a prior life, I had a job consulting for a firm, and they were so paranoid that individuals, if they knew where the data came from, how the data was obtained, what the data meant, that they would go out and start their own company. So therefore, those people weren't really versed on what could be useful to you. And in doing so, it really degraded the information that was provided and the comfort level that was provided to the users. And there's no reason why the individuals that you talk to, anybody at that firm should not know. I can tell you from experience, nobody's going to go out just by knowing where data points come from and be able to put together a company and make it work. Don't focus on the data that is not relevant to you. If golf handicaps are important to you, focus on it. If they're not, why are you wasting your time on it? Ask about how they get those data points. Not all data points come from the primary sources. If they don't, there could be issues in how those data points are gathered and matched to other individuals. And that could lower the quality rating of it and take time away from what data points are important. So you should be asking those kind of questions. I'd also be very leery of marketing gimmicks. We start seeing them, I think, a little more and more. So again, some examples. Recently I saw something that talked about low soft bounce rates and was tying that back to quality of the email. For those of you that have done email campaigns in the past, a soft bounce rate has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the email. It will not tell you if an email is good, if an email is bad. It has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with, did you call that list down to make it more like an opt-in list, remove everybody else that was non-deliverable and go. It's a similar thing if you're talking about leads promised from individuals, right? You want to look at that and say, is that important to you? There's a lot of companies out there that will promise you leads, and some are very good. I'm not certainly saying that they're not good, but you want to ask about those leads. How are they refreshed? How often are they refreshed? What's going to happen in a year when I'm still using that list? So these are all things to do prior to getting the data and maybe getting yourself into a contract with somebody or an agreement, and know that that data is as good as it can possibly be. Now, why is that important? Here's an example of just the data that we have. Now, there's lots of other data out there. There's all kinds of production data, all kinds of transactional data, all kinds of data that's gotten from surveys. This is just a small snapshot of what we have. I'm picking on the insurance database here. And when we talk about insurance, number of agents, there's 2.5 million insurance agents that we capture. These are key categories. There are a little under 25 million carrier appointments that are active. We have another 10 million inactive that we capture. Almost 15 million licenses, almost 5 million emails, over 5 million phones, and a couple million addresses. That's a lot of data. Now, tie that together with the data points over here that we have when you look at both the individual and the firm. So I have just an insurance agent. I've got, close to 400 or so, or I'm sorry, 200 or so data points on them. If that agent, right, and we've got that information on both the agent and the agency. If that agent is also a registered rep or an IA, we might have these additional data points on them. So as a whole, just in our world, just in our database, we can have a little more than 1,400 individual data points on these folks. So that's why it's important to understand your data. How do you get around it? How do you navigate around it? Why do you need the best profile? Because of the volume of data that's out there. So how do we do this? Why is it important to understand? Again, pretty elementary, right? Bad profiling wastes time. It does. You must know what your profile is, and your provider must know how to target your prospects based on that profile, right? So you got the best data. That's the first step. How do you make sure now that you're profiling folks in the right way? There have been folks that I have talked to in the past that just say, well, you tell me what my profile is. That's virtually impossible. It's impossible to do. You're not going to get the right results. You have to work with your provider in order to get those right results. It drags on productivity and morale, right? It lowers morale, things that you may not think of, right? We're talking ROI and some things that you can measure, but talking about morale. Somebody is not getting the right results. It creates a lack of trust with the data provider. So I told you I'd share some stories. We have a client recently that came on board, and to be quite frank, they came on board very quickly. And that was great. They were referred by somebody. We will not put anybody on our platform unless we train them. We found out, I guess probably about 2 weeks after they signed up, that somebody who was supposed to be trained that missed the training was already using the platform through somebody else's ID, and had already sent the phone numbers over to a phone center, an outbound phone center. Well, you can imagine what happened. The tool wasn't being used correctly. The profile wasn't right. Money was being spent on these outbound phone calls. Our client was looking at us like, what did you do? And so what we had to do is kind of pull that back and say, okay, look, let's start with the basics. What is your profile? Who are you looking to call? Who do you want on the other end of the phone? And what are the questions we can ask then to adjust to that, right? Do you want to know about production data? We'll ask about production data. Do you want to know if you're really focused on selling, selling ETFs, or you're focused on insurance? We'll ask about those types of things. The other thing that might happen is users are going to go to other sources, right? So we had an instance here where we had somebody that had called and was calling out on folks, and they were just getting people that they just hadn't profiled correctly. And so they went, company is paying for our data, for our subscription, and here's somebody using another source. That hurts your ROI. There's no doubt about it. So we had to get together with the individual and say, okay, look, what is it that you need to do, and how do you need to do it? And, we had actually an employee here a while ago that said to me one day, in response to a question, we're not saving lives. And my response to that is, we're not saving lives, but we are helping livelihoods. So we've got to make sure, and we've got to work with these individuals, and they've got to work with us to make sure that profile is right, because for each missed call and for each missed opportunity, we're impacting their livelihood. Of course, again, it's the obvious. You save time and money. Rerunning lists takes time and delays your outreach. Getting kicked off an email platform takes time, right? If you don't know your data and you don't know the profile, and just a quick example, we have opt-in versus non-opt-in emails. Some people know what they are. Some people don't know what they are. An opt-in email is somebody that you know. A non-opt-in email are the emails you're going to get from providers like us, from other providers that they don't know you. They haven't given you permission to reach out to them. If you use the wrong platforms, you are going to waste a lot of time. You may risk getting kicked off those platforms that only want opt-ins like MailChimp and Constant Contact. So you have to understand the data. You have to understand how to use it. You want to avoid, time being wasted on attempting to understand your results as well. So again, storytelling here. We had a client who We took about 2 weeks to try to figure out what happened with an email campaign. And the client had basically said to us, look, we got a lot of non-deliverables and we want to know why. We're not sure your data is as good as you think it was. So we took 2 weeks to research this, and we found out a couple of things. Number one, this client had pulled some data from their CRM and mixed it in with our data. Some of the data was over a year old. Okay. So you got to know, you got to understand what data you're pulling. You got to understand if you're mixing data with your CRM data, what that is it profiled correctly? Has it been updated? The other thing was this particular platform, after a certain number of bounces, would mark an email as non-deliverable. And they should. That's good for you. But it doesn't mean it's a true non-deliverable. It just means they don't want to send it out again so that it soft bounces. So here's somebody who not only wasted time because they didn't understand the data, where they were pulling it from, or even the profile, who basically wasted time in going in and setting up the campaign, sending out to the campaign, spending money on that, then spending money with us to go in and research it and figure out what went wrong. We don't mind doing that, but here was a client who did it. So that's why you need to understand your data and what you're doing. So what can you do to do that? Be sure your provider sat in your seats. It is very important that whether it's an internal provider or an external provider, that they've sat in your seats. They have to be able to talk to you about the data. They have to be able to talk to you about your experience with the data. They have to know that there's certain sections of data that maybe you could find an RIA firm that deals in alternatives, or that maybe you can tie your lines of authority together with your carrier appointments in order to see what production those people might be focusing in on. Okay, that's important. Don't generalize. We see this way, way too many times. You've got to invest the time in what your upfront profile is. It's no different than a builder, right? You've all heard the saying, measure twice, cut once. It's a similar thing. We have had people say to us in the past, just one example, I want all big banks removed in the St. Louis area. Well, we can go in and pull out big banks, right? We know big banks, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, pull them all out. But we don't know what's considered a big bank in St. Louis, maybe something we would never consider. This particular client just did not want to take the time and invest the time to do this, put the time into really profiling correctly. They did an email campaign and a phone campaign, and they got miserable results. And they couldn't figure out why until we said, well, because you're getting to people that don't fit your profile. So you've got to make sure you do that. Training. I can't talk more about training, how you should be trained and trained over and over and over again. That is the only way that you can get to know what you're doing and how you're doing it and what those important data points are, and build that relationship with your data provider. This is critical, not only for people that are actually pulling your data for you and doing the profiling, but for the people using the data. We have examples of people that are using data. This is kind of a circular example here, where the data is being given to others in the firm to call, to email, to do what they want to do with it. They really don't know what order to do it in. They don't know of 3 or 4 phone numbers, which one they should call first and what makes the most sense, what's most efficient. Of the emails, what to do and how to do it. In this particular case, we talked about how using certain criteria to better profile, and the people not pulling the list, but the people using the data just don't want to take the time to do it. Yet every time they do a campaign, there are some complaints about how they're not getting the results they think they need or they think they should. So in that case, we just have to keep training them, just keep training over and over, keep reinforcing what we're doing. And, I can't stress enough how that industry experience is important as well. So we talk about best data, right? There's some little tidbits in there about how to go about doing that, why it's important to understand your data to get to that profile that you need. All of that is critical. Oversight is critical. Too many times we see people that are just kind of given access and just let to go. And there's lots of bad things that can happen. There are some good things that can happen too, but there's some bad things that can happen. To start, the users may not be expert in the field or even in using data. I went to a firm once where they had somebody selling a similar product, and the person had been selling Anderson windows. And the reason they were hired is because it was touted that they, were able to make 150 dials a day and tons of contact. And that's great. And this person was a really, really good person. but they really didn't know what they were doing once they were looking to profile or once they were getting on the phone, how they would best understand that data, what they could do. That's oversight, right? That needs to be managed into them. It's critical for management to understand the data as it is your users, right? I just put in here, is your marketer BSing you? We've seen this a couple of times, right? In one particular case, we actually had a client that went to another provider who actually came back, was being told that our data was not good. Found out that the individual that was using the data was really not making any phone calls, was really not sending out any emails. So now you've invested in this platform. You've invested here time and money and training to get this work done. And if you're not overseeing those folks, you may not know what they're doing. Look at scripts and understand responses. That's another important thing in the oversight and seeing what you want, getting efficient, getting more ROI. And what do I mean by that? We had a client who called us up and said, listen, we're getting a lot of folks. We need people that are life licensed or have a lifeline of authority. And we keep getting people that are saying they don't sell life insurance. Okay. So we talked to the manager there and we figured out a couple of things. Number one, we will go back in and we will look to make sure that the people that they are saying are not life license or have a lifeline of authority, that they are. And we'll prove that out. So we did that. Two, we went in and we looked at the script. And the way the script was written, it was basically saying, hey, listen, I am I'm looking for you to sell our life insurance. Do you want to do it? What's the easiest way to get off the phone? No, I don't sell life. I'm not licensed to sell life. I retired. So these are things you've got to look at. They changed their script. They increased their contact rate. They increased their conversion rate. Sounds simple, but it's things that we don't always look at. It's things we don't overlook at the oversight. And by the way, there's some managers that are just out there that would like to say, oh, it's the data too, because maybe they should be doing a little more than what they're doing. So it's a critical part of it. And know how to leverage data with other vendors, whether it's emails or other providers, and how to stay out of trouble. Again, I mentioned, we've had a client or two get kicked off of some third-party opt-in platforms because they were using our data in mass and they're not supposed to. We talk about that in every call we have, every prospect call, every training call, how best to use our data, what to do with it, what not to do with it. And it does keep you out of trouble and it does make you more efficient. So what do you do to maintain the oversight? Be trained on the data. Even if you're a manager or you don't need access to the data, you should insist on getting trained on it. Usually the folks that get trained are those people that are just going to be the users pulling the list. You should be trained on it as well if you're not already. The obvious, work closely with your team, pull your team in though with your vendor as well and say, listen, let's talk about how we can get better profiles. Let's talk about what we can do. Let's talk about how we can use the data and leverage that data to make sure we're getting who we need to. And push your provider, right? Push them to say, hey, we need these tools to better do what we do here. We tell our clients all the time, if there's a data point you need, we'll look to see if we can get it for you. What we do is we'll say, look, if it's efficient to get and it's cost effective to get, we'll look to get it. And a key thing for us is, can we keep up with it? So whether it's the data point or a button on a tool, on a search tool that is helping you, you should push your provider and look to see how they can help you to become more efficient with what you're doing. From the provider perspective, on the first slide that I showed you at the bottom, it said education through partnership. We are a firm believer in this. As a matter of fact, every prospect call we have, every training call we have, most times we're on with a client, we will say to them, our job is to make our data as valuable to you as possible. They should want to do that. It's a little self-serving, right? If our data is really valuable to you, what's going to happen? You're going to come back. You're going to re-sign because it's being effective. From our perspective, we think that's very important. So that's where the transparency comes in as well. They should provide concrete and backed up responses too. So if you're looking at a provider, and again, some of this applies to other things, how you make sure you're getting the best data, how you profile them correctly. But again, this is the partnership that you have. So what are those responses? Again, another example that we have, we had somebody come to us once and say, we don't think your phone numbers are as good as you think. So we literally ask, the first question we're going to say is, how many out of how many, right? If it's 10 out of 1,000, 10 out of 10,000, that's okay. We're still going to look at everyone. If it's, 900 out of 1,000, that's a problem. But regardless, we will ask people and say to them, give us your list of what you're saying are bad. And we will literally hand dial out. There's a bunch of us here that do it, myself included, and call those numbers. And we'll see what the results are. That gives us confidence in our data and what we're saying. That gives our clients confidence in what they're doing. And what happened in this particular case is we got 3 lists from the client. On one list, 30% of the numbers were good. On another, 50%, and on another, 80%. And even they had one employee there who was on the phone who called me up a couple of weeks later and said, I listened to what you said. I dialed the numbers. I put those away that I thought were no good. I called them later and 90% were good. So these are things that your partner, your vendor should be partnering with you on to make sure that you are getting the best out of your data, to make sure that you're understanding the data, right? To make sure that they're partnering with you. It's critical that your provider combines technology and manual sourcing or intervention. We're seeing this more and more. There's providers out there that are saying things like, we can go out and confirm an email every 6 months, or we can, put our technology into it. And we're constantly out there crawling and doing different things. That's great. That can only be for a portion of the data. We just know that. There are just sources you can't go to do that. Through that partnership, they should be telling you that. So they should be talking to you about that. They should be telling you what they're doing to make sure that they get to all those sources. Your partner should be adamant about providing follow through and assisting you with getting the best profiles. We see in a lot of industries, right? Not just ours. We see that there are some degradation in service levels. I have a cousin who went to probably one of the top 5 schools in the country as an undergrad. A couple of his kids have gone there. You walk in his basement and his basement looks like you're at the school. He had a good career as a surgeon, had to retire from that, so went back for his executive MBA. And he came back one day and we were talking and he just looked unhappy. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, I'm just so unhappy with my school. He said, I've gone there undergrad. My kids have gone there. I've given them lots of money. I went back. I chose them for my executive MBA. And I said, why? He said, well, they are basically teaching in class that you should do just enough on a service level side to keep your ROI as high as you possibly can while still maintaining the client. Now, some providers out there, they have to do that. They may have investors. They may have PE firms that are backing them. They may have large companies that are looking for certain margins, right? But they should want to service you and make sure that you get what you need when you need it, no questions asked. One of the things we do, and you should look for as part of a partnership with any vendor, is we will tell people whether you use our services or not. We'll help you to become more efficient, right? To get better ROI with other services you're using. So if you're using a MailChimp, if you're using a dialer, you have your marketers on the phone, whatever it is, doesn't matter if we're getting revenue for it or not. We'll go through the results with you. We'll make sure that you're getting the best results. We see lots of things coming through. We're not marketing folks, right? But we see lots of things from our clients and we see what works and what doesn't. So we'll talk about things like use a landing page if you're sending emails, right? We'll talk about what to do if you're sending direct mail and how we can help you to make sure we limit what goes into certain, certain mailboxes and things. So those are things that you should ask for. I mentioned they should be asking what other data you need. And a key one here, they should seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And that's not my phrase, that was stolen. But I think it's critical. I hear way too many times people just, getting calls and getting a service item and they're asked, okay, we need X, and they just turn around and provide X, right? Your partner, your vendor should be asking you, why do you need this? What are you looking for? What is your ultimate profile? If they're not, they're not adding any value, right? Many times we'll change things here based on that profile to try to get better results. And those are the things that you want to make sure. I've also seen lots of people who want to give, demos of things. And basically they just go right into the demo, give a definition of every data field and move on. They should be talking about how that data field can help you, how the combination of the data fields can help you, right? How they can get you that better profile. Those are things they should be going through, but they more importantly should be asking you, what's important to you? What are your goals? What are your objectives? What are you looking to do? Who are you looking to get on the other end of that phone or email, and why? So that is very, very important. So we're kind of back to this slide and the discussion. We probably got, just for those of you who are hanging on a little bit, probably about 5 or 10 minutes left. You can see why these key non-negotiables are so important, right? Before you even get to the services, right? You've got to make sure that you're looking at these 4 things. You're looking at your best data. Do you have the best data possible? Do you understand your data? So ultimately you can get to the best profile. And do you have that oversight? All of that is going to increase your efficiency. All of that is going to increase your ROI. You need to make sure you've got that education through that partnership, right? You may know the data well, they may know it better. There are going to be things that you know that they don't, and those should be leveraged to make sure that you're getting the best out of this that you possibly can. As far as the services go, again, we have some folks that may be doing emails, phone calls, one-on-one. Some of the larger clients may have literally hundreds of people that are doing it, or may outsource it. But what's important, right? So when we look at this chart here, right, we've all seen lots of charts from the McKinseys of the world and the Gartners and whomever, and they're very good at what they do. I tried to keep this just as simple as I possibly could and show that even a little bit of a bump up in any of your conversion rate or a little bit of a loss can be very, very impactful. So what this is illustrating over here is that you have targeted leads. And I took this as a good profiled leads, right? So we're assuming, and these are kind of general numbers that are always out there and kicked around, that whether I'm looking at 1,000 leads or 10,000 leads or even 100,000 leads, that my contact rate is 20%, and I'm converting 5% of those folks. So for a small shop, this may be 1,000 leads over the course of a year. For a large shop, this may be 100,000 in a week, or maybe 100,000 in a month. But what happens if you have those non-negotiables are bad, right? If I have bad, and these are just things I picked on, there could be a lot more categories here. Let's just say I have bad contact data. I may have done the best profiling in the world, but my data is bad. If I drop my conversion rate by just 0.5%, I'm not converting one person on the small side, 25 on the large. That could be 1 in the year, which could be a make or break year for somebody, smaller shop, or that could be 25 a week for a larger firm. That's a lot of money lost. That's decreasing your return on your investment dramatically. Same thing could go for poor profiling or lack of oversight, right? All of these, if I just look at a decrease of about 0.5%, you'll see what the impact is. Now, if I combine them, right, I'm now looking at 3 people lost, 8, 75 prospects that I didn't convert. That's a lot. Now, if I take this to the next level, right, and I want to say, all right, how do I get more conversions on what I'm doing, right? It starts here. If I have, if I just have bad data, this is all going to go wrong up here, and you're just going to get lesser results. But it starts up here. So let's pick on a couple of different campaigns, right? Email campaigns, outbound calling campaigns, digital marketing campaigns. What we're finding is that when you're combining these, and again, small shop, you might combine them by doing them yourself, picking up the phone, making phone calls, sending out emails, maybe doing a couple other things. Large shops, you may be outsourcing this, but it's all the same. It's all the same result. So if I'm doing email campaigns, right, and I'm doing it with good data, I may get a 0.5% bump up here, let's say, if I'm doing them correctly. What we've found now is if I combine that with other touch points, we're increasing your conversion rate. And that's one thing that we look at a lot of times when people will call us and say, well, I'm not getting the results I want. The question always is, what are you doing? How many touch points are there? I'm kind of old school. When I was in high school, you used to hear how, you needed to hear something on the radio 5 to 7 times prior to somebody converting, somebody actually hearing it. It's a similar thing. So why not take that into practice here? So if I'm going to email folks, right? Let's say I send out 1,000 emails. Well, why not follow that up with outbound calling campaigns? Now, outbound calling campaigns can get expensive. So why not work with your provider to limit who you're calling? Maybe you call just those people who opened. Maybe you call just those people who converted. Who clicked through, right? But the more you call them, the more that you're going to get out of your conversion rates. Maybe you call on those people that soft bounced, those people that because of their spam filters are probably never going to get your email. You're never going to get in touch with, call them, or even more so, put a digital marketing campaign around them. Now, these tend to be a little more expensive. You're following people around the internet. You're putting your brand in front of them with a landing page. Tend to be a little more expensive, but what a great way not only to reinforce with the individuals that you emailed, some that you called, but how to get to another segment of your list that you can't get to through other means. Maybe they don't have a phone number. Maybe they have an email, but as I said, the spam filters are stopping that email, right? There's lots of things that can happen. But if you look at this, right, you can see what the impact can be, either if you're not looking at those key non-negotiables, or if you're not doing multiple campaigns. It's not to say you have to. It's just how can you increase your rate by doing these as opposed to just doing the simple things that maybe some are doing today. So I've gone about 40 minutes here. I wanted to stop right there. Kevin, I'm going to ask you if there are any questions at all.
Yeah, so we actually do have one. The question is, how do you hold internal or cloud provider data warehouse and secure the data you gather?
If they're asking about us in particular, meaning AccuPoint, everything that we do, we're a Google shop. What we do is out in the cloud. So we have everything there. We like that from the perspective of they're incredibly secure. They provide, of course, best in class servicing for us. So our information is stored out in the cloud through a lot of protective security that we have out there. The one thing about our data to consider is all of our data also, even though we have very strict security on it, all of our data is for the most part out in the public domain. We don't have account information. We don't have social security numbers. We kind of like it that way. But we still take that security very seriously. And so our stuff is out in the cloud through a Google shop.
Awesome. And the next question we have is, do you work with clients to provide conversion strategies?
We can certainly do that. I wouldn't say that we are experts at conversion strategies. I mean, are we going to go in there and like a McKinsey, I just use them and really, come up with this great deck for you and say, here you have. No, we're not going to do that. What we do is practical though. What we do is sit with clients and say, listen, and it's all about budget and time and focus. But let's look at what you're doing today. And our goal is all the stuff I talked about, the data and all the stuff I talked about, those key non-negotiables, that's first. But then what are those different services that we can tie together that can get you those bumps up in the conversion? So it starts with how many people do you want to get to? And what are the different avenues to get to them? Because maybe you can't get to them one way or another. And then how do you bump up your conversion from there? So the answer is yes. I just want to tailor expectations that, that is not something that we look at as a service, but it's certainly a part of our DNA and what we do each and every day. Because as I said, if our data is not valuable to our clients, if they're not getting results, they're not going to come back. So it makes sense for everybody.
All right. Thanks so much. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So if there's no other items, I just want to thank Gary for taking the time to deliver this presentation for you guys. And thank you all for attending today. As I mentioned, a recording will be sent out to all registrants. So we'll get out of here about 15 minutes early. So thank you all for attending today's webinar and have a good day.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, NAIFA, also for sponsoring us. We appreciate it. Appreciate what you do for the industry.
No problem.